In this video, I provide an overview of the Hadoop Development Environment setup. You'll need to decide how you're going to set up Hadoop, either directly on your host or using a virtual machine. I'll go over the process and the various options for setting up your host. So let's look at the process. First, you're going to prepare a host. So this is where you will decide if you're going to run directly on your laptop or your desktop. If you're using Windows, I have instructions for that. If you're using a Mac, there are instructions for the Mac. If you're using Linux, then you can follow the instructions for the Ubuntu installation, with maybe some variation if you're using CentOS. But basically, we're going to install Java. We have to set up passwordless SSH so that the Hadoop daemons can run. We have to set up some environment variables and then choose an installation location. For the Hadoop local demonstration, you're going to install Hadoop and just run it in local mode. You need to download the binary tar and expand it in our installation location for Hadoop. And then we can just run it. We'll test Hadoop on the local file system. Next, we'll set up Hadoop distributed or pseudo distributed mode. So we have to override the default configuration. So we're going to set some things for HDFS. Then we start up the HDFS daemons, create a home folder on HDFS, and then test Hadoop using HDFS now. We'll basically run the same job we ran with Hadoop local, but this time it will be using our distributed file system through the HDFS daemon. Finally, we're going to set up Yarn. And for now, just understand that Yarn is the execution environment for Hadoop jobs. So we'll configure Yarn. We need to restart the daemons for HDFS. We'll need to start the Yarn daemons, and then we can run the same Hadoop job, this time testing it with Yarn and also HDFS. So that's it. It could take you a little while. We'll have this whole week to accomplish this. So let's take a look at our options for host installation. If you're running Windows, you can use the Windows subsystem for Linux. I recommend you use Ubuntu. It requires Windows 10 version 1607 or greater. If you have even a later release of Windows 18917, which was released in June 2019, you can try WSL2. I don't have that available, so I can't really give you instructions there, but you are welcome to give that a try. If you're running a Mac, we'll install directly on Mac OS Darwin. It's a Linux-like OS, so we will use Homebrew to install Java, and basically everything else will work the same as it does in Linux. If you happen to have a Linux distribution directly installed on your hardware, either Ubuntu Desktop or CentOS, then things will just work as normal. You can just follow the Hadoop setup instructions. This last option is to run Ubuntu in a virtual machine. You'll need to install VirtualBox on your host. I would recommend this if you have a lot of resources available and you're not that comfortable doing system administration on your own box. This will sandbox the work you're doing on Hadoop, and you're not really making any changes to your host other than installing VirtualBox. So let's take a look at each one. With Windows, you are going to install WSL. There's a link to the instructions here. There's also a video of going through the setup, so I won't talk too much about that here. For Mac OS, we're going to use Homebrew. And like I said, we just need to install Java or Java 8 if you don't already have it installed. There is the need to enable SSH remote login so that the daemons can use SSH to start up. Finally, if you're going to use Ubuntu within a VM, you'll have to install VirtualBox, and then I'll have a video on how to do this. We're going to download Ubuntu Desktop as an ISO, create the virtual machine. You'll need at least 2 gigs of RAM to dedicate to the virtual machine. We're going to create a 20 gigabyte dynamically allocated drive, and then we'll install the ISO. And for VirtualBox, you also need to install the VirtualBox additions to make the usability better. Here are the common steps that apply to basically all environments. This first step of installing Java, I'm showing you the Ubuntu method. For Mac OS, I'll do that in the Mac OS prep video. You will need to configure a Java home environment. We'll have to configure passwordless SSH. If you're using Windows, I will show you that in the Windows installation and then cover it again when we go over the common host preparation using Ubuntu. We'll have to create an installation directory and make sure that you are the owner of it so you can expand Hadoop there. So finally, we're going to then set up Hadoop in a single node cluster fashion. We'll be using Hadoop 3.2. You can download it directly from Apache. We're simply going to expand the tar file into user local Hadoop. And then we'll follow the documentation for a single node cluster setup. I'll have a separate video on this as well. The instructions don't seem to cover configuring Hadoop home as an environment variable, so I'll demonstrate how to do that as well. So that's it. You just need to choose what direction you want to go, install Hadoop directly on your host or use a virtual machine, and then pick the appropriate lectures to review.